US President Donald Trump is on the verge of becoming the first leader of the United States to be impeached twice. The House of Representatives is moving forward with a vote to impeach Trump in a few hours' time. A number of key Republicans now say they also back the move. Trump will face a single charge of incitement of insurrection over the storming of the Capitol building by his supporters last week. Trump denies he encouraged the violence.
President Trump has been subject to massive criticism of late, but he can still draw loyal supporters. Banned from major social media outlets, Trump seized the opportunity on Tuesday to reconnect with his base. He headed to Texas to talk about one of his favorite topics, the border wall with Mexico. But before that, he remarked about efforts to remove him from office.
The impeachment hoax is a continuation of the greatest and most vicious witch hunt in the history of our country and is causing tremendous anger and division and pain, far greater than most people will ever understand, which is very dangerous for the USA, especially at this very tender time.
His comments came as debate continued in the House of Representatives. Democrats are stepping up their efforts to remove the president from office. Democrats accuse Trump of having incited the Capitol riots and say failing to hold him to account would be a dangerous precedent.
All of us should do some soul searching about 5 dead Americans, a Capitol police officer who's dead, dozens of people wounded, lots of our Capitol Hill cops in the hospitals, and a country on edge, and an inflamed right wing which thinks that we are on the verge of a civil war.
The assault on the Capitol has eroded support for Trump in Congress. Several Republican lawmakers say they're willing to back impeachment efforts. They now include 5 members of the House of Representatives, notably Liz Cheney, the number 3 Republican in the chamber. She's released a statement saying the storming of the Capitol was Trump's doing and that he did nothing to stop the violence. She said there has never been a greater betrayal by a president of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution. Cheney's move lays bare a split among Republicans over Trump and the future of their party.
I'm joined now by DW reporter Peter Roller-Dahl. Peter, impeachment is moving forward at a swift pace in the House of Representatives. What's the latest on the efforts to remove Trump from office?
Well, today really is set to be a historic day. Donald Trump, all but sure to become the first president in U.S. history to be impeached twice. It is really notable that over a dozen Republicans have indicated that they'll back that effort. Just over a year ago, the first time Donald Trump was impeached, exactly 0 House Republicans voted to impeach. But the insurrection on January 6th really does appear to have been the last straw for many in his party. High-ranking Republican member Liz Cheney released a strongly worded statement saying that there's never been a greater betrayal by a president of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution. It really does signal a strong break with Trump, who's finding himself increasingly isolated as he leaves the White House, and that many Republicans really see the party at a crossroads. You know, according to reports, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has even indicated that he believes impeaching Trump is not just the easiest way to get rid of the president, but also get rid of Trumpism from the Republican Party. Whether that translates into Trump actually being removed from office is a different question. He would still need a 2/3 majority in the Senate to do that, and that's all but guaranteed.
Yeah, he's a man under siege. What's the president himself been saying about all of this? He's been digging his heels in somewhat, hasn't he?
Right. Donald Trump never was one to admit mistakes. And his first public appearance since the violence that was on Capitol Hill last Wednesday really was no different. On Tuesday, he went down to Texas, and Trump continued to deny any culpability in the violent riot that left, a lot of people dead and threatened the lives really of not just members of Congress, but of his own vice president. Trump insisted that his remarks to his supporters in Washington, which many took to be an encouragement to essentially storm the Capitol, that those remarks were, quote, totally appropriate. Trump also warned that his impeachment could lead to more violence. And that statement has worried a lot of people because they know that Trump supporters are hanging on to his every word and could read this as a tacit encouragement to even more unrest.
Peter, stay with us. We'll come back to you in a moment. But first, let's take a look at this report on preparations and the increased security measures in Washington ahead of next week's inauguration.
Time to tighten the screws. Washington is boarding up in anticipation of the presidential inauguration. Victor and his colleagues have their hands full with work. They have never seen the city like this.
Everybody's afraid because we don't know nothing right now. So we try to do best protection or big safety for the people.
Instead of festive celebrations, businesses brace for damages. And at the Capitol, security has been ramped up significantly. The atmosphere here at the Capitol is very different compared to last week. For one, an over 2-meter-high fence was erected and is patrolled by members of the National Guard. Additional police is roaming the streets, all of which to guarantee the safe inauguration of President-elect Joe Biden next week on the steps in front of the Capitol. The big worry is that pro-Trump supporters will try to disrupt the ceremonies, but police wants to be better prepared this time. The city is in a state of emergency. Buses with National Guard troops arrive around the clock. Up to 15,000 soldiers could be deployed in the city. Meanwhile, the stage is set. Preparations are on the go. But a celebration certainly feels different.
You know, I'm excited for Joe Biden to assume the presidency, but at the same time, as I continue to read reports about potential insurrection here again, potential insurrection across all 50 U.S. capitals, it concerns me, to say the least.
I think now that we saw that the Capitol was stormed, I think there's a high chance that we'll see more people who think that that means that they can just behave like that.
I feel safe now. I mean, this place looks like an armed camp at the moment.
Authorities are discouraging Americans from coming to D.C. on Inauguration Day. Like many others, Victor will stay holed up at home instead.
I always prefer staying in the house, see for the TV what's going on, because I don't want to go out.
It will be a hard task for Biden to bring the barricades between Americans down again.
So still with us here in Berlin is our reporter Peter Relladal. Peter, lots of security on hand for the inauguration, which was not really the case last week. And law enforcement in the US is also warning of major trouble looming.
Right. We've seen a lot of activity on social media by Trump supporters planning more violent protests in the days ahead of the insurrection. One of the big dates there is January 17th. And it really shows just how coordinated they are. And what we saw last Wednesday was far from just a spontaneous act of rebellion. America's senior military leaders, the military joint chiefs, have also come out releasing a statement condemning the insurrection that we saw last week in the Capitol, and really reminded their service members to, of their obligation to support and defend the Constitution. And that is notable because usually these high-ranking military leaders get out of their way to do anything that could be interpreted as political. And this really comes amid reports that, as I said, several violent rallies are being planned ahead of the inauguration, but also amid reports that the FBI actually knew that this was going to happen, an internal memo suggesting that they were aware of all these plans on January 6th before it happened. So a lot of pressure to avoid a repeat of January 6th.
Peter Relladal, thanks so much.
Thank you.
The business world is moving much more quickly against the U.S. president than the political world. The New York Times reports that Germany's biggest lender, Deutsche Bank, says that it will no longer do business with President Trump or his companies. Deutsche Bank is the biggest lender to the Trump organization, which is being run at the moment by the president's sons. Deutsche Bank's move follows last week's assault on the Capitol by a mob of Trump supporters. Deutsche joins a growing list of companies that have cut ties to Donald Trump. All right, for more now, I'm joined here by my colleague Kate Ferguson from DW Business. Kate, it's good to see you. We know that Deutsche Bank was the only bank willing to lend Donald Trump money. No American lenders were willing to do that. How much of a blow is this going to be then to Donald Trump?
Well, Brent, this is really the moment that all the elements that were propping Donald Trump up are beginning to crumble, politically, personally, and now financially as well. So a large chunk of the Republican Party no longer supports him. Social media platforms have banned him, and now the money taps are being turned off as well. When it comes to Deutsche Bank specifically, this has been an incredibly important relationship. As you mentioned, most mainstream lenders stayed well away from Donald Trump because of his reputation for not paying back his loans. He currently owes Deutsche Bank about $340 million. Those loans are due to be repaid in 2023 and 2024. Now, if he can't come up with the cash, Deutsche can actually seize his personal assets. And given how increasingly isolated Trump is looking, that is not an outlandish prospect.
Amazing. There's a lot to this Trump-Deutsche Bank relationship, isn't there? I mean, I know there are suspicions of a connection between Deutsche, Russia, and Donald Trump.
Well, yeah, this is a relationship that has lasted longer than any of Donald Trump's marriages has. And just to give you an idea, the woman who managed Deutsche Bank's affairs managed Donald Trump's affairs at Deutsche, Rosemary Vladeck, she was a VIP guest at his inauguration. So that gives you some idea of just how cozy the relationship has been. The money that he borrowed, he used to buy luxury hotels, golf courses, skyscrapers. But that same woman, Rosemary Vladeck, she resigned very abruptly last month from Deutsche Bank. What we know is that she was the subject of an internal investigation into a purchase of an apartment from a company that was partly owned by none other than Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law. So if it seems like Deutsche Bank is now just jumping on the bandwagon because everyone else is, actually they have been trying to distance themselves from Trump for a while now because, quite frankly, he is bad for their business.
Well, other companies, they are also rushing to distance themselves from Donald Trump, aren't they?
Yeah, it's really a domino effect. And one of the most interesting examples of this, I think, is Stripe, the payments company. So it is no longer processing donations to Trump's campaign website, and that potentially could be a huge blow. Now, the other lender that was working with Trump, Signature Bank, they have closed his account, and they have also called for his resignation. And of course, many other companies like Microsoft, AT&T, and Airbnb, they're no longer donating to Republicans who are not accepting Joe Biden's election victory. So it certainly does look like the business empire is crumbling.
Yeah, in the U.S. in politics, money talks, that's for sure.
It certainly does.
Kate Ferguson, as always, Kate, thank you.
Thanks so much.